Welcome to today's Explainer. We're diving straight into a really fascinating and honestly pretty controversial critique presented by Dr. Fiona Gherkin. We're going to neutrally break down her perspective on the feminist concept of internalized misogyny. So whether you are deeply familiar with feminist theory or this is your first time hearing about this debate, we're going to examine exactly how the source analytically dismantles this polarizing sociological theory step by step. The source material actually begins with a really provocative hook, asking questions just like these. Do you think women exaggerate workplace problems? Or, hey, does it make you uncomfortable when a woman completely dominates a conversation? Dr. Gherkin points out that in today's cultural landscape, if a woman answers yes to any of those questions, she might swiftly be labeled as suffering from internalized misogyny. It's a pretty heavy label, and the source seeks to unpack exactly what it means and how it's currently being utilized.
So here's our roadmap for today. First, defining the core concept, then the evolution of the term. Next, we'll look at the real-world harm and division, followed by the circular reasoning and gaslighting, and finally, shifting blame and accountability.
Let's kick things off with Section 1, defining the core concept and the source's main thesis. The absolutely crucial point here is how Dr. Gherkin defines the current usage of this term. According to her, internalized misogyny, which you might also hear called internalized sexism or oppression, has morphed completely. It's no longer just some passive academic label. Instead, she argues it's been transformed into an active tool used to penalize political dissent among women. Basically, the argument is that it enforces ideological uniformity. And the wild part? In doing so, it allegedly mirrors the exact same patriarchal control and policing of women that it originally claimed to oppose. Moving right along to Section 2, the evolution of the term, from academia to social media. Now, this is where it gets super interesting, how this concept evolved over the decades. Back in the 1960s, you had radical literature, like the Pedagogy of the Oppressed, talking about internalized oppression. Then, by the 80s, theorists like Sandra Lee Barkey started applying this specifically to femininity. But the real game changer? The source argues that happened around 2010 when Tumblr feminism just exploded. Suddenly, this dense academic jargon jumped into everyday online chatter. By the late 2010s, it had become a mainstream universal weapon, one that gets aimed at any woman who defends traditional gender roles, expresses affection toward men, or even just critiques modern feminism. Okay, Section 3, real-world harm and division, focusing on groupthink and purity spirals. Dr. Gherkin argues this concept causes some severe sociological fallout. Slapping a woman with the internalized misogyny label imposes this massive moral judgment that shames her into compliance. This creates what sociologists call a purity spiral. Imagine a toxic sisterhood where people adopt more and more extreme positions just to prove they belong, aggressively punishing anyone with moderate views. The source claims this is incredibly insulting to the intellect of women who hold conservative or traditional values. Think about a mom who just wants fair custody treatment for her sons, or a woman who really enjoys traditional chivalry. Suddenly, they're branded as woman haters. Ultimately, it just builds walls between women.
Let's jump to Section 4, circular reasoning and gaslighting, and how this plays out every single day.
To really show how intellectually bankrupt this concept can be in practice, the source gives us a highly relatable micro-narrative. Picture this. A husband opens a car door for his wife. The wife says, I generally really like it when he does that. Seems totally harmless, right? Well, Dr. Gherkin uses this to demonstrate a very specific type of circular reasoning. Enter the hypothetical friend who counters with this exact quote. You do realize you have internalized your husband's misogyny, so anything you say is essentially his voice and not your own. Wow. The source highlights this logic to show how it's designed to completely destabilize a woman's core beliefs. It's an argument designed to be totally unanswerable. Basically, you disagree with me, therefore your brain is brainwashed, hence your view is worthless. So you gotta ask yourself, is this empowerment or is it straight up gaslighting? According to the critique, this plants a really insidious seed of doubt. A woman might start second-guessing literally every interaction. The source gives a brilliant example. When they went on holiday to Fiji, did she actually want to go, or did she just internalize his opinion because she originally wanted Thailand? Imagine how exhausting that would be. This manipulative logic, the source argues, actually infantilizes women and erodes the fundamental idea that their thoughts and choices are truly their own. And this perfectly illustrates the source's main contrast. On one side, you have this critiqued feminist theory, assuming some invisible patriarchal programming is pulling the strings in a woman's brain. On the other side, good old Occam's razor, the principle that the simplest explanation is usually the right one. And the much simpler explanation here is that women just have diverse beliefs, values, and priorities. We don't all think the same. The source points out the massive irony that while feminism claims to value women's voices, it often seems happy only when all women are saying the exact same thing. To back up the idea that traditional values aren't inherently oppressive, Dr. Gherkin cites a 2024 study by Wilcox. Get this. Women in marriages with traditional elements like prioritizing family and religious involvement actually tend to report higher life satisfaction and meaning. It turns out mutual respect in a relationship yields greater happiness. So the data directly counters the narrative that embracing traditional roles is just some sad symptom of internalized misogyny. Finally, we're at Section 5, the conclusion of the source's analytical breakdown, shifting blame and accountability. The source strongly argues that internalized misogyny has essentially become a get-out-of-jail-free card for bad behavior. Take everyday workplace toxicity. If a woman gives her female coworker the silent treatment or even makes inappropriate sexual comments at work, this concept is allegedly used to say she isn't really to blame. Instead, she supposedly learned this from men. It's just her self-imposed patriarchal oppression. Dr. Gherkin argues this fosters a wild delusion where women can engage in highly toxic behavior, yet hold the firm belief that any of those actions are solely the fault of men. We end this explainer with Dr. Gherkin's final, highly provocative thought. She talks about slaying the accountability dragon. The argument is that society was convinced this dragon was fueled entirely by the evil deeds of men. But once the dragon was slain, accountability didn't just vanish. It was reconstituted onto an invisible enemy, the patriarchy, and the men who remain, leaving us with a huge question to ponder. Does a concept like internalized misogyny genuinely empower women, or does it merely shift accountability and leave division in its wake? It's a really complex perspective on modern sociology, and hopefully this breakdown helped clarify the core arguments.